Good morning and welcome to Leading Dragons podcast number 8. Today we have a very special guest. Welcome, Pierre-Antoine.
Hello, Deborah.
Good morning. It's lovely to
Good
see you,
morning.
and what a beautiful view you have.
Thank you.
Geneva.
Let's take Geneva, but it's from Lutry, where I live, where I have my office, and I'm very fortunate to be able to see that every day. So welcome to Lutry.
So Pierre-Antoine, I'm delighted to have you join us today. And as I was just reflecting over today's podcast, I was just thinking about how we're nearing the end of 2020 and how, you know, the upheavals of this year have really brought an increasing appetite for truth and for breakthroughs. We just want to hear the real truth. We want to hear that what are the real issues that we're faced with in terms of leadership, in terms of running organizations. And obviously that with this upheaval, there's chaos. And just before I press the record button, we're talking about how chaos can in fact be a great opportunity to take a step back and look at, you know, what is it that what's actually happening? What is the chaos telling us? And what is it that we are not seeing? Where are our blind spots? We know, and we also talked just before we started, we talked about organizational systems, you know, we're including health systems, education systems, financial systems, government systems. They are all shaking and the foundations are rumbling because of all this upheaval that the global pandemic, it didn't bring about, it just surfaced. So with these models, as we're seeing, and this an increasing uncertainty of the economic landscape, let's talk today about what it means. What does it mean to each one of us individually? What does it mean to us collectively? And what it is, how we can start leading fearlessly by stepping into our power and speaking our truth. And perhaps that's the only way forward today. Anyway, Pierre-Antoine, over to you. So you are the co-founder and the director of Praneo, which is a transformation consultancy. Tell us about you, what got you to where you are today, and your quest.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me on your channel first, and thank you to everybody who's taking the time to listen to us. So where am I from? I'm traditional engineer, MBA, very well-trained kind of guy. Lots of successes in most of what I've used to do, and who experienced something quite, something that I could not really plan and forecast, which is failure. Divorce, car accident, mistakes also in the multinational I was working for, and also a sense of, okay, it's been too quick, too fast, too crazy. My first 15, 20 years in business were very, very successful, managing 15, 20, 30 people in IT, tech, consultancy, in large multinational. And so I had this time for, kind of cooling down, seeing what success means, what it doesn't bring. And I can say that I've been fortunate to have this period in my life of 2 to 3 years where I had to completely reinvent myself, reshuffle the dice and so on. And we created Praneo in 2015 with this idea that the change we were looking for at that time, and we were already talking about environmental issues, motivation, engagement in companies, especially multinationals, burnout, and all this topic that we had lived and faced in our own skin and bones, you know. So we were saying, okay, what needs to be done? So we started with this very first-hand experience of saying, okay, what did we lack? And at that time, we figured out that psychology and the the big word psychology, including the mind, including everything that relates to empathy, being one with the other, was almost not in the courses of any MBA, of any engineering degree, and the managers were not prepared, okay, to manage people in the psychological way, okay, how to manage motivation, how to talk about empathy, managing life, and and personal life, work balance. So all these topics were absolutely not in the radar. And so we created Praneo with this idea that we had to work with people who had to experience change in their own life to help companies change in their organization, in their management style, in their ethics and marketing, the branding, all the way they communicate to their customers. So moving from greenwashing, social washing, ESG washing, into something that brings ethic or purpose at the core of growth. And yes, it was years before the COVID crisis, years before even the la votation of yesterday in Switzerland. So I think we were quite, we had some years in advance at that time.
Wow, so I'm just thank you, Pierre-Antoine. I'm hearing a lot about this identifying the gaps that traditional management has actually never taught any of the managerial leaders or any leaders. So it's always bottom line discussions, profit-making discussions and objectives, and basically figure-related measurements of performance. Whereas a company's livelihood and lifeblood is the people. And how are we supposed to look after our people and employees within organizations? And you mentioned empathy, you mentioned motivation, work-life balance. And so this is where you have stepped in, you and your agency, your people, to help organizations. I would like to, so I can see this as more sort of intrinsic values that you're inviting leaders, managerial leaders particularly, to discover and to unveil in order to be able to move the organization, shift them into a new paradigm. Would you like to tell us a little more about motivation?
Yeah, motivation is maybe I'd like to go back a bit on what you've said. If we look back to the 80s, the 90s, and even the year 2000 and so on, and we were in time of growth, okay? Wherever we could look at, growth had to be managed. So in that sense, the idea of rationalization, focusing, made perfect sense. And if I had to go back to the 70s or 80s, I would probably be in a management style that focuses on bottom line and pressure, okay? The thing is, or my analysis or my intuition tells me that the context has changed. And probably we'll have to say in which area we'll have to focus. If you and I were working in technology, we would be probably managing growth and growth and growth. And in that sense, it would be probably useful to put pressure, rationalization, because the wind will help us, is helping us. The market is growing, okay? But for most of mature markets, industry, and whatever we can see that is suffering with the COVID, now there is a need for reinventing oneself. And that requires huge motivation and intrinsic motivation. And this is where I look back to your question, and now I can answer. So if there is growth and double-digit growth, motivation can come from the outside, and I'm happy with that. Maybe the traditional way, the MBA way, the carrot and the stick is working, okay? But if you need to reinvent yourself, if you need to find new business opportunities elsewhere where you have not been trained to target, then that really requires intrinsic motivation. And let me explain that. For example, there's been a few years now that the B Corp model has emerged. Companies, purpose-driven companies that benefits people. ESG has emerged a few years ago, and it was like, like in the winter, the seeds are still within the earth, and we are looking for spring and summer. And I believe that these times of chaos for some industries are also the spring for some other industries or some other ways of doing businesses. And I believe ESG, B Corp, and all this movement that truly has to go with intrinsic motivation for the good of others, doing what's needed for the other, what's needed for the environment, is at the seed level or early stage, to use a more VC language. So we are in this movement of huge growth, but very likely, or my point is that we have to see growth and opportunities in areas where there was not previously.
And as I listen, I just have this picture in my mind of extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation, and how traditional growth phases, like you said, we don't have to dig deep at all. We just tick along, and we just ride that wave. Whereas when there is no growth, or there's less growth, and we're faced, you mentioned about a different context, and the economic landscape is uncertain, unknown, that's where we have to look inside to see, okay, so we're going to have to start being motivated from the inside out.
That's what I believe in, yeah.
Yeah, which is organic growth, because you talked about ethic and purpose.
And if I may also, agility, startup mode, flat organization, empowerment in terms of management side, all of these are really, really relevant for maturing industries and startups or seed stage companies. At some point of time, and that I believe that was a mistake in Praneo, we were advising companies to move to agility, management 3.0, etc. That was very, few years ago, it was very like buzzwords and so on.
Fashion.
And I'm not saying it was a mistake, but like there is no magic stick, we have to move on to easy solution to complicated situation. And these are very, very useful tools, but in some specific situation. And we have to understand that what is right and wrong is not really a matter of doing right, it's really fitting the context and matching what is useful, relevant in the now, in the here and the now, with what we can do. And it starts to a very different dialogue, moving from PowerPoint presentation, this is the truth, these benchmarking the others within the industry, the KPIs and so on. Sorry, that just doesn't tell me how I am going to work out in this own very situation, mimicking the others will not help me move through incertitude, complexity, chaos, however you want to call it. So it's not about mimicking the other, it's about finding your own way. And today managers, they have had to reinvent themselves with the COVID situation, with home office and so on. So this is, for me, the right path is matching the context with your own skills, strengths, and weaknesses. Does that make sense to you?
That's a beautiful invitation to building and developing our capacity of adaptability.
Mhm. I think
And that means stepping out of your comfort zone
mhm.
and exploring places and realms that we don't know, that we've never been to before, which is quite it can be quite a scary thought if you think about it.
It is.
Um, I'd like to go back to Praneo and how you've developed your business with your clients from when you founded it in 2015. And you talk a lot about human structures, the importance of human structures. Given what's, especially with this pandemic this year, um, and the upheavals that it's brought, how has that impacted human structures? And what are the types of questions that leaders are asking themselves today?
Hmm. Well, from my window, from what I see, there are those who had planned before. For example, we have done a 12 months project with a customer in the luxury industry, and we have installed home office before the pandemic, before the first lockdown, and so on. So we have been able to work bottom up, also top down. We have been able to, in a very patient way, to structure processes, to have also laptops available, procedures, safety questions solved before the pandemic. So when the pandemic arrived, there had already some stuff being set up to face that. And I'm just talking home office, which is
Mm,
like the tipping point of the iceberg. Okay, but I want to illustrate something with that, which is if you have been somehow prepared to working differently, then when the pandemic and the lockdown and everything else arrive, then you're not as in trouble as those who have not seen anything. So my quickest answer to your question is, well, there are those who had prepared, and very often there was no good reason for that. Okay, it was more like an intuition, or in the case that I mentioned, this watch brand, it was a bottom-up project coming up from the people. And
mm,
there is this there's this thing that we cannot explain, which is collective intelligence. If you ask what is needed to 100 or 200 people, you will not be able to explain, but they will very likely be able to come up to a solution that is good. The issue is that collective intelligence, because it's not necessarily a rational process, it's not good for these particular reasons. My experience is that collective intelligence or intuition cannot order in time. Okay, when you have a rational logical deduction, you can say, I have this event, therefore because of this and these parameters, I come up to this solution. Whereas when you go to collective intelligence or intuition, there is no time scale. Okay, and this is why it is so helpful in times of uncertainty and chaos, because when the time happens, okay, it's just from one day to the other. So there is no timeline, there is no possible preparation for that.
mm,
So all the brands and the companies that have had collective intelligence way of coming up with innovation, they came up to be prepared when chaos has arrived, you know? So you can only look afterward that your preparation was good, okay? And we were used to always rationalize, so issue, logic, deduction, solution. And this works very well in maturing markets, growing market, where you need, when you have this natural growth coming from the environment, that works well. And honestly, this is the good way to manage a company in that situation. But
mhm,
when there is chaos, you need to have management styles procedures and management that understands intuition, that understands collective intelligence, that will be that will be able to come up with something
Mm.
before the crisis occurs.
But so that's really it's fascinating, and I love it's one of my favorite topics, collective intelligence. But in order to bring that about and to enable for that to happen, we first need to look at, okay, so is there the right environment for collective intelligence to be harnessed? Collective intelligence happens, like you say, not up here, not in the cognitive part, but more just, the heart, the gut, our whole selves. We're bringing our whole selves collectively within a given space and time, where we can interact in such a way that it brings about collective intelligent results. You talked about creativity and invention. That can only happen in an environment where people are not scared to take risks, are not scared to be vulnerable. They trust one another. There's not going to be judgment in the room, because if there's judgment, clearly, then what's going to happen? Well, you close up, and then we go back to being heads on sticks, and creativity doesn't happen up here. So innovative solutions.
Not only.
Huh?
Not only, yeah.
Not only. Well, they're probably justified up here, but the actual tapping into our creativity happens, and our collective intelligence happens.
It happens everywhere.
Yeah, happens collectively, exactly. And it's about being vulnerable as well. And so let's move into this part of working, particularly this year, where COVID, for most of us, has meant a huge change in working from home. So that's impacted family dynamics, where both spouses are working and they have to rearrange just the home, never mind with the kids and the dogs and the cats and the goldfish, where everything is remote now. So rapport and also virtual relationships are being construed, but it's again a different degree of relationship. It's not the same as meeting somebody in person and having a discussion in person. There are also longer hours. There's a lot less, the boundaries are a lot foggier working from home. And consequently, that's brought about increased stress, and also as a result of micromanagement from some leaders, because they feel they need to just check in and see that nobody's having a lie-in in their team, or a day off, or a half day off, or whatever it is. So there's a lot of things. What do you believe, Pierre-Antoine, was the biggest impact that COVID has had on organizations?
Honestly, it's a huge question. It covers a lot of aspects. Maybe if we focus to work conditions, I think you quote and named everything, from the lack of being fed by physical meetings. There is all this body language that, 90% of our interaction is nonverbal. So by focusing only on my voice, you lack a lot of what I'm expressing. And I want to make it very, very clear. Innovation is about risk-taking, is about trust. And you only do that when you have the right level of trust. And I don't want to say that there is no innovation possible through a microphone and a camera, because that would be too extreme. But for the topic or the discussion that we are having about reinventing ourselves, I want to make it clear. If we talk about small changes, like a sparadrap or small patching something, that's okay. But if we want to, new product, new strategies, new way to talk to customer, because value, we can feel value is essential now. who can say that ethics and value are useless now, and it's all about the business of business is business. So that kind of reinventing yourselves cannot happen through Zoom or any video conferencing tool. That's not going to happen. We need to see each other. We need to cry, hope, go through the vicissitudes, the ups and downs, and that's a human stuff. You know, if you think how a startup work, the guys or the women and the people who are involved in it, they literally live together, they sleep together day and night, and that's the kind of building trust and going through the ups and downs that one time it happens and you got the great idea, and this is it, and this is the right way to do it. And you never know, you have to take risks. So risk taking, trust, empathy is not about video conferencing.
Yeah, which makes me think that this year has been particularly a year which has invited us all to slow down. And there's a lot less interaction, human interaction, as in personal, physical interaction. And it's been an opportunity in the chaos to look inside and to increase our self-awareness and what it is that we really doing what we should be doing in terms of adding value to our lives.
And if I may, on that topics, I mentioned my years of cooling down, stepping back, and during that time I was doing a lot of meditation, especially one called Vipassana, and they are 10 days silence, 10 hours of meditation per day for 10 days. That's quite intensive, and I've done 5 or 6 of that. I don't want to really advertise that, but it's the same thing as I was talking about. When you have this movement of stepping back, cooling down, and you have chosen this moment, and you're prepared, you know. So when the lockdown happened, I just say, yeah, I kind of know that. I've been exposed to being alone with myself, seeing all that anxiety, stress, but also this, wow, great opportunity. I can do that. This energy going back. So once you have trained your body, your mind to stepping down on the relationship, being with yourself and so on, when this happens, you're just so much prepared. And for those who have not been exposed to that, I have seen a lot of anxiety coming up. That's true. Family that live one too close, so close to the other, the context emerging, the kids, blah blah, and lots of people who are quite solid, you could say, in terms of body, in terms of doing sports, being active, being successful. They start to, have these waves of anxiety coming up, and they don't really know what to do with that. And they are, my experience or my bias or my intuition tells me that it's the very consequence of just cooling down with the interaction, you know. It's like when you want to lose weight, okay, well, first stop eating too much food, and when you reduce the food eating, you have this anxiety, you have this huge greed, I want to eat, okay, and this causes a lot of stress, and that's the same that we are facing with lockdowns, COVID, lack of interaction. There is this anxiety coming up, but we have to go through that. It's very important. Meditation, yoga, and all these kind of techniques of presence and consciousness and so on, they help us train our mind to go through. And that's the only thing we can do, because it's not going to last, okay? And this anxiety, this stress is not going to last. It has a beginning, it will have an end. So why worry?
And I'm just imagining as well, you talk about these fairly disciplinary 10 hours a day of meditation methods. That's so for training your mind, but even just a walk along the lake behind you. I mean,
Absolutely.
even or going for a run. Yeah, no, it does help, and there are different forms of meditation. It's about mindfulness.
Mhm.
I run 2 to 3 times a week. I've never put earplugs in my ears. I don't need to listen to music. I want to be, with nature. I want to
Mhm.
hear the birds, and it's just reconnecting with source and reconnecting with self.
Yeah.
Um, Pierre-Antoine, you're invited as a dragon. You are a dragon, and a dragon is a fearless leader.
Well,
Would you
so not
like
a
to?
dragon, I have fears. Let's be fair.
Well, this is it's a long journey, isn't it? And that's why we're in it together.
Mhm.
And united, we'll be stronger, and we'll be able to help
Well, that's for
um,
sure.
those who are seeking to not only shift their mindset, but actually to step into action. And this is what Leading
Mhm.
Dragons is all about. And would you like to share with us a story in a time in your life where you were faced with fear, and yet it did not prevent you from taking that step into action?
Hmm. Um, which one will I take?
Up
There's
to
so
you.
much. No, honestly, I mean, and also maybe I'm not sure I would like or would live a life without fears. I think it's maybe a mistake to expect from life a fearless life. I understand uh, what you point out, which is going through fears, and in that sense, fear can bite you, and you just accept being bitten, sorry, by fear. So there's a level of acceptation, but you can. I mean, I've never been in a situation where I have not being in a position of being afraid, and I'm not sure I want a life without being afraid. There are very good reasons why fear is useful. Fear of the fire burning, fear of a mistake, fear of getting rid of life. Sometimes when you have this level of depression, sometimes you say, I just don't want anymore. And if it was so easy to take a gun and get suicide, I think we would never learn. Okay, so fear is very essential to love and go through life and reinvent yourself. So I don't want a fearless life, and I really want to stress that in
Mm,
the spiritual movement. Sometimes whatever comes with fear, the ego, the dark side of yourself has to be like put aside, and I'm really not in that. I say wherever there is fear, there's an opportunity to learn. Wherever there is a dark side, greed, power, some level of destruction, then there's something to learn, and there's something human that is going through me. Okay, I think there is money, glory, fame, destruction, hate. They makes us human. So, with that being said, your question was, can you quote a situation where there was fear, and how did I overcome that? Yeah, maybe let's get through this one. So again, in that meditation stage or boot camp, there was someone with a handicap. There was snow outside. We had 10 minutes to walk, and this person just fall down. And for 3 days, I've had been invaded by really pain, but pain that only, I mean, you have to live that pain to know what pain is. And staying with that pain for 3 days is something that I've never faced before, honestly. And I saw this man with his handicap falling down, and I say, guy, come on, you can go through that. And I just sit down, and pain disappeared. And it's not that pain disappeared, it's that I stopped giving so much importance to the fear
Mhm.
I was living, you know. I said, come on, it's not that important. Somebody else is going through much higher level of pain, much higher level of fear. Come on, you can go through that. And it happens this way. So it's not about, I believe, sorry, I believe, or I think it's not about erasing fear, is about acceptance, a level of acceptance, and going through. And I can mention a divorce where my divorce, I was fighting with, I was sure I was right, and the lawyer and all the judge, and at one point of time I said, come on, get rid of that. And everything else was much fluid once I have stopped fighting.
Mm.
So this continuous chain of reaction, where we have some sense of control,
Mm.
power, is actually the opposite. The more we tend to control, the more we tend to act or react or think or plan or blah, blah, probably the more we create or we feed the problem we are trying to solve. So yeah, this is how I would answer to your
Well, yeah.
question.
Well, thank you, Pierre-Antoine, and it's fascinating, this the concept of fear, because it's a question: how much are we self-cultivating that
Mhm.
fear that we're facing? And you talk about that very thing, which is, if we can choose to focus, what do we want to focus on? Do we want to focus on our own fear? And as as the saying goes, what you focus on expands.
Mhm.
So from
Absolutely.
there, what do you choose to focus on? Do you want to focus on your fear? Do you want to focus on holding on to the outcome and
Mhm.
controlling the outcome? But then, yeah, if you choose to shift that focus over to acceptance and letting go, things just flow
Yeah.
and the fear
But
dissipates.
but if I may, we need to have suffered enough to go through the level of acceptance, and that's something that's usually in the spiritual New Age world. The suffering and the effort is not seen as something that has value, and I'm saying effort and fear has a value, but it's not about identifying to, I'm a fighter and therefore I need a fight. Okay, so it's exactly what you said, is coming to a point where you have suffered enough, you have done enough effort, you have done enough planning, and then you can
Yeah,
stop doing that and get the fruit of all this effort. But as long as you're firefighting, you're a firefighter and you need a fire.
yeah. And this goes back to the organizations inside. The choice
Mhm.
is ours. If we want to see change, do we just moan about it? Moan about it in the corridor, moan about it. Well, obviously they're not corridors right now, so the virtual corridors of 2020. Yeah.
Should I, would I, could I, and so on. Yeah, that's not about this. Absolutely, it's about okay. The same example I had with when you want to lose weight. Okay, it's first stop intoxicating yourself. Okay, so there is first this idea of letting go with the toxic habits, and that's so key, because when you have had enough of toxicity within your organization,
Yeah.
toxic management, pressure, getting social plans, minus 20, minus 30% budget, and all that kind of stuff, at some point of time, okay, we kept on decreasing the staff for what, 10 years now? Do we want to go on with that? Or have we had enough of letting go people, very likely letting go the best of us, and staying with all those who have no choice, who have no voice, who are full of stress, full of fear that innovation cannot happen with that? Or do we want to bring
Yeah.
something that we have never tried so far?
Yeah.
Trust,
Yeah.
empathy, and so on, and empowering people. And that's something. So first, letting go with the toxicity,
Yeah.
letting go with the wrong habits, and try something new. And it will come, the more you let go with the toxicity and the past, the more there is room for something new. Okay. But the idea that I must do something new usually doesn't work. I mean, my experience, it doesn't work this way. You have to leave space first.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful way to wrap up, Pierre-Antoine. And so if there's one takeaway, I mean, over to the listeners now, I'd like to invite you to ponder over a lot of key messages that were shared today on our podcast with Pierre-Antoine. And is there one particular insight that might have resonated with you? Perhaps a hidden teaching, maybe something that you're going to walk away with, and it's going to be food for your soul to think about what is it that you can start doing differently today. And it's at the end of the day, it's about making a promise to yourself. Like we said at the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about motivation, and drive starts from the inside, especially with all this upheaval of that 2020 has brought with us. And God knows what next year is going to bring. More chaos perhaps, and more opportunities. Pierre-Antoine, is there one message, one last message that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I would say trust. There's within a family, a work organization, nothing can happen without trust. There's a certain level of I trust you that is needed. And especially in these times of we have so few physical interaction, we need to reinvent the way we trust each other. And yes, if I had to sum up everything into one word, the first would be trust. I think it's easier than compassion and all these complicated work that we sometimes get afraid of. But trust is something that we can manage at a very basic level. And it's about raising children. It's about motivating our staff. Also trust in the future. Okay, some things are going to last, and some others won't. But whatever comes after, I can trust it will be good for me. So trust in the future, trust in our family and friends, trust in the circumstances, sometimes also trust in our politicians, stakeholders, shareholders, management. It's not a time where we need to be afraid of the other. It's not a time where we can say, I know everything and I know better than the politicians. I know better than the government. I know better than the C-suite and the CEOs and so on. Let's have trust one to the other. And I think that's a key way, very efficient, something that we can manage at a very individual level. And I truly believe in trust.
So that's a beautiful way to finish this podcast. So over to you, dear listeners, who at the end of the day, trust is a choice. So who would you like to start trusting today? Until next time, have a good day. Thank you. Bye, Pierre.
Thank you, Deborah. Bye-bye.